Well, good morning, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I do want to say, just before we get started, to anyone that's watching, Todd actually reached out to me to offer to redo the interview, so I didn't even have a chance to ask him. So I just really appreciate that. Takes a huge stress off my shoulders, and I'm glad that we're able to do this morning.
No, I'm happy to do that. Happy to help because I appreciate you taking the time to share with your audience, the conversations that we had had and put everything together. So it's the least I could do.
Well, I appreciate that. Um, Everybody who's watching knows this. I'm Odd Job Entertainment. I'm your typical host. I'm joined today with Todd Laughlin, who is the CEO of Coex 3D. Todd, why don't you give yourself a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, so actually, Todd Luthane is how I pronounce the name, but you were darn close.
Okay.
And Coex 3D. I don't know if I'd use the term CEO. We're pretty small business, and we enjoy that. We enjoy being small. I mean, we're certainly not what I would consider to be like a boutique business. We have a very full line of filaments, and we take what we do extremely seriously. But we also don't want to be like a big mega factory. We like being a factory that puts great pride in the filaments that we do make. We have customers that range, of course, in the B2B sector, you've got all different types of businesses. We work with a lot of schools. We offer a very great educational discount program. So if anybody in the audience is listening and knows that their school uses filament, we certainly would like to be a supplier to that. And then we also work with a heck of a lot of hobbyists. So our customers really do run the gamut. But what we don't really go after is like the great big enormous print farm type business and stuff. We really like working with small to mid-sized manufacturers, with hobbyists who put an emphasis on quality filament, that want to know that they're getting good quality stuff made right here in the US. And we like to have this type of relationship, with our customers when possible. Clearly, it's not possible to do that all the time, but that's just kind of in the nutshell of what we are all about.
And just recalling from our previous interview, the one that no one is able to hear, unfortunately, it sounds like a lot of those small company values are really important to how you guys operate. And being that you are a American manufacturer, what does that mean to you?
I think what it means to me more than anything is control over what we do and the expectation. The bar is pretty high, and we like that because we know that we can live up to that. To me, I take great pride in being a U.S. manufacturer, and I think that there's a lot of our customers that love supporting U.S. manufacturers. Most filament that gets consumed here in the United States, unfortunately, does come in from overseas. And some are big companies and some are smaller, lesser known brands. But the fact of the matter is, whether they're big or small, very few consumers have any ability to reach out to the manufacturer if they have problems, if they have questions, if they have concerns. And what we see and hear from our customers is tremendous inconsistencies with filaments that are coming in from overseas. And I mean, to give you just kind of a made up example, but it's real. It happens all the time. Somebody might buy a canary yellow PLA, and they get it all dialed in. And the next time they go to order that, it comes in the same box and it's on the same spool, but it's a different color yellow, and it prints at 10-degree different temperature than what it was the last time that they did it. And most people they don't do anything with that. They don't have somebody to complain to. They just tolerate it. They just say that, well, I guess that's what it is. And with us being smaller and being focused on that and being focused on quality, we can make certain that that problem should never happen, because we always use the same materials every single time we make something, from the raw resin that we're using to the color and putting it in at the same recipe formula. But you know what? If somebody does have a problem, we have 100% satisfaction guarantee that we take very seriously, and we will make it right with our customers. Oftentimes, it might be as simple as somebody's trying a material they've never used before. We have people and the resources available that we can talk somebody through that. We want people to have success with our material. That's how we have customers that come back to us again and again. And we might be a few bucks more than the overseas competition, but I would say by and large, our customers are okay with that because A, they're getting a much better quality, and B, they know they've got the support to back it up. So, these great big filament companies that are shipping in literally container loads of filament from overseas, they don't take care of their customers in the same way from a support standpoint. And they probably don't have to. They're big enough that they can do that. We're not big enough, and so we have to do that. We wouldn't be here if we weren't.
Well, and I think that there's something to be said about the fact that you and I are able to do this interview. I mean, twice now I've been able to get on the wire with one of the higher ups in the company to ask you about your product, and it's that I think is really cool. That's a testament to what you're saying.
Yeah. I appreciate that you appreciate it.
And, speaking of consistency, I've now used over 3 kilograms of the mystery PLA from Coex.
Okay.
It's been working fantastic. You might have seen a sneak peek in the video that was released before this. We're doing a giant 61 centimeter spaceship on the channel. And so it's lots of big parts. They've all got to fit together. I've been really impressed. I get the settings dialed in, and it just works. So 3 kilograms, no issues.
Perfect.
And then you probably have hinted at it, but what has been the biggest hurdle to overcome as an American manufacturer?
I think that really comes down to, Jake, is price. People have an expectation that all filament should be, $16 a spool or whatever. So it's a hurdle, but it's not an insurmountable hurdle, because quite honestly, there's people that are never going to pay more. They're always going to buy the cheapest. They're not going to become our customer. And that's okay. That really is okay. We would rather have customers that say, you know what, I want to have the experience that Jake had. I want to be able to know that from a consistency standpoint, I get those settings dialed in and I'm going to get perfect prints. I think that when it comes down to overcoming that, if we use the term hurdle of a price, it really, if somebody tries our material, more often than not, they're going to say, yeah, that was worth it. That's worth 20% more, 15% more, depending on the material. So gaining customers the first time around is our biggest challenge, but the challenge is oftentimes because of price. Now, the reverse of that is also true. We have an easy time keeping customers and maintaining customers. And our repeat business is extraordinarily high. So we do work hard to find new customers, but keeping those customers, it's the material most of the time that keeps them coming back.
Well, and I can definitely see that. When we had done the previous interview, you had also offered to send a bonus spool that I did actually take to work, and I've been prototyping products there professionally, and it's been great. I don't know what filament we were using before. The label had disappeared a long time ago, but it's been a huge relief to just be able to use our cheaper printer, tell it to do a job, and actually have my part be done the next morning.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing that you bring up, kind of how that came to be, right? You and I connected, and then through conversation and through experience, then now your business is hopefully going to become an ongoing customer. And that happens more than you could possibly imagine, and it can go both ways. Sometimes people get exposed to our filament at work and they say, this is what I want to use at home. Sometimes they get exposed to it as a home hobbyist and say, I'm going to tell my employer that this is a material that I want to use because I'm tired of the frustration of the other stuff. Throw schools right into that same mix too. I had a real fun story the other day, or a situation where there was a teacher at a small tech school, and he had been a student there, then he was a teacher as he was trying to find his career path, but they were using coax filament, and that's where he got to know us. Well, then when he did get that first real job out of school, he was doing the additive manufacturing for them, and they were using, like so many are, using, a whatever we bought off Amazon type of filament. And he turned them on to us, and they have turned into a very, very sizable customer down in Texas. And, that kind of stuff is fun. So, we do that educational discount because we want to support STEM programs. We want to support education. But there is, a bit of a method to our madness there too, because those educational customers, those are the engineers of tomorrow. And those students get used to our filament, and they don't like to go with anything else. So that was probably the most recent and most fun story with that it's they're now a very large volume buyer for us.
That's awesome. When you offer a quality product, you don't have to worry too much about the advertising, right? Let's see. So the next question is, what sets Coax apart as a brand? But I was looking at your website recently, and I saw this banner talking about how Coax has been in space.
So our filaments have. We haven't. Although I feel like my head is in space all the time. Yeah, we were selling quite a bit of our ABS to SpaceX, and so we can definitively say that our materials have been and probably currently are in outer space. So that's just kind of a fun thing there. And obviously, we don't have access to the files or know what SpaceX is doing with our stuff, but they have confirmed for it because we've asked them, are you, how are you utilizing the materials? And they're like, it's up there.
So. That's awesome. So aside from that, why should 3D printer enthusiasts be looking at Coax?
I think because everybody who 3D prints at some level, regardless, they want good looking quality prints. Everybody wants it. Many 3D printers need it, right? If you're in the B2B world and you're producing something that is, whether it's a jig or a fixture or a prototype, or you're using it for manufacturing, you need a quality product, and you need to put a product onto your 3D printer and a material that when you hit start and that you come back the next morning, or, let's not kid ourselves, sometimes it could be a 5-day print.
Yeah.
You want that sucker to work. Hobbyists, same thing, right? Especially even if somebody's like just learning something, it's a really fun hobby, as we all know, but it also can be frustrating when you have print fails and you go, why did it fail? Was it something I did? Was it, something in the slicer settings? So I think that eliminating the filament as the potential problem of a fail is a really important thing. And I'm never going to be so bold as to say nobody's ever had a problem with coax filament, right? That's not realistic. That's why we have the satisfaction guarantee that we do have. But if somebody is having problems, what we're going to first start with is let's work through that together and see if we can solve the problem. And very likely it's probably not filament related. But when you're just learning and you're experimenting with different things, or heck, even if you've been printing for a long, long time and you have those fails, where do you start from a troubleshooting standpoint? And that's why it's important to use a good quality material, whether that's a Coax 3D filament or, there's some great U.S. manufacturers. And I think that by and large, it's not a completely true statement, but by and large, U.S. manufacturers, because there's not very many of us, we hold ourselves to that high standard. I think it's worth noting to your viewers that the sad reality in the 3D filament manufacturing world, there is zero regulation, none whatsoever. And that's no regulation from what somebody calls a filament, to have it live up to certain performance standards. If they say it's a carbon filled, well, they could have less than 1% carbon in there and call it a carbon filled material and never face any recourse on that because there's no regulation. So when I say that we hold ourselves to a standard and our U.S. counterparts hold themselves to a standard, it's truly that we are the only ones that are holding us to that standard is ourselves. And that to me is the importance of picking a brand and picking a manufacturer that you can trust. I would say look for transparency there. You know, is the manufacturer willing to say what materials are they using to make it? You know, will they disclose things? If somebody's not willing to disclose even those basic realities, well, they're hiding something as far as I'm concerned. And we've got nothing to hide because we're very proud of our materials that we use. And when I say use, I'm talking the raw materials that we use to make the finished product. I want to make it very clear that we are a soup to nuts manufacturer, that we start with raw materials, we start with raw plastics, we run them through our extruder machine, do everything here, and what you're getting has been manufactured and produced in our factory. There are a lot of U.S. companies that call themselves U.S. filament companies, but they're not manufacturers. They're getting stuff in from overseas. Maybe they're repackaging it, but probably not. It probably came in private label that way from overseas. And there's a whole bunch of those companies that are U.S. filament companies. But if you go on their website and you don't see pictures and videos of their manufacturing process and their manufacturing floor and willing to describe how they do what they do, probably not a manufacturer. They're probably just a reseller.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I don't know if you saw Smarter Every Day. He just put out a video yesterday talking about the Smarter Scrubber and his journey in trying to make a 100% U.S. manufactured grill scrubber. And there's all kinds of challenges that came into that of making sure that the parts that you're ordering actually come from where they say they're coming from.
Yeah.
So it is quite a challenge to, one, be a U.S. manufacturer and actually be a U.S. manufacturer. It seems like those are two sides of the coin. And I wanted to pick out another thing that you mentioned there. This is something that I did show in my video as well. But while we're talking about the higher standard that you guys hold yourself to, on screen I'm recording as I go through your gunmetal gray PLA, and we can just pull up the TDS here. Base resin, NatureWorks, NGO biopolymer, and then I haven't seen on other TDS is all these different certifications, like FCN 000178 from, is that an FDA regulation?
It may be. Let me try to work along with you here and pull up what you're looking at.
And basically what I'm trying to drive home is we have the basics of physical properties, specific gravity, melt flow rate, those different kinds of physical parameters, but this certifications section of a TDS is kind of new from my perspective on a filament document.
Well, there again, you know, I mean, it comes down to what I had said earlier, no regulation, you know, so I mean, if a manufacturer doesn't want to provide a TDS, they don't have to provide a TDS. And we want to make that stuff available. I mean, you know, keep in mind too, we have a lot of customers that are B2B customers. So it's not a matter of wanting to know what's in it. They need to know what's in it because, you know, they have documentation that their customers are going to hold them to say, you know, if you need, there's a thing called a COO, Certificate of Origin. COOs are something that are very important to a lot of companies that have to, you know, disclose everything about their product. I mean, so we can put together a certificate of origin. It's not something that we offer to everybody because it is a few extra steps. You have to, a true certificate of origin, you know, we have to say that spool was manufactured on this day and it, you know, lives up to these standards. But your viewers will notice if they've used our material or when they give it a try for the first time on every one of our product labels on the spool itself. Is a serial number and a lot number. So we can track that spool back to the exact, you know, what production line was it made on, what shift was it made, you know, obviously, you know, the day that it was made and everything, but, you know, even down to the order it was made, you know, if it's 003 at the end of it, well, it's a third spool of scarlet red that was made that day, or whatever the material type is. But we take that tracking to a pretty high level to be able to make sure that we can nail down. And we do that for a lot of different reasons. But one thing that's very helpful with that is, again, we're not perfect. We're human beings, and the materials, sometimes you get you could get a bad batch of color. We don't have the ability or the time to test every single spool that comes off the line and every single material type that comes off the line. We do a lot of quality control measures, but our manufacturing QC measures are what dictate that we should make great stuff. But we've had it happen over the years where somebody complains about something, and then we document that, and lo and behold, the next day somebody else complains that it came from that same lot number, and next day somebody, then we've got a problem on our hands, and we'll take care of that. And we work with our suppliers to find out how did it happen, what happened. But without that kind of data and that kind of tracking, we wouldn't be able to do that. And that is another important thing that I would say, by and large, I don't know of any overseas manufacturer that's taking it to that level that would be able to say what was the true origin of that spool.
Yeah.
And a lot of the really big companies, and I know for a fact that they have their filament coming out of multiple supply houses, multiple extrusion shops. So, the spool may look the same and the box may look the same, but, you could get 3 back-to-back batches of materials that all came out of different factories.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I'm also involved a bit in airsoft, right? In a lot of these airsoft guns, they also come from overseas, and you'll have different factories making those as well. So, I mean, that is just the reality. A lot of times when you're working with a overseas manufacturer, there's no way they could keep track of everything like that.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, and it's been a little bit of time since our last interview, so I am kind of curious to see if your answer has changed. How is tariffs going to affect your pricing, and what has been the result of that you've seen?
So at this point, we've had no price changes whatsoever. We have seen since we last talked, but obviously nobody got to hear that. So I think that when we first talked, I had told you that we had not had any vendors that have announced any kind of a price increase. We had probably heard from all of them, or I had reached out to them, and they said, we're going to do all that we can to mitigate it and control it, and we will let you know far enough in advance, if there's going to be increases. So since that time, we have had some that have announced some changes. We have not implemented any kind of a price change. We, of course, want to have continuing conversations with our suppliers. They've been relatively small, single-digit percentage changes. And one colorant supplier, there's certain hues of colors, like the red family is going to be affected more. But I think it would be so confusing and so hard for our customers if we had to say, okay, scarlet red is $2 more than every other PLA. So, we're just not going to do that. And it wouldn't need to be that dramatic anyway. So I would say, as of right now, we're still holding true to the fact that we don't think we'll have to pass anything along. I hope that continues to be the case. I should point out that we work really hard on having U.S. suppliers. So our spools, for example, are manufactured locally to us. We're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, for your viewers that don't know where we are. So our boxes come locally. They're made in Wisconsin. Our spools come locally. They are made and produced in Wisconsin with recycled cardboard and chipboard that comes from here. So there shouldn't be anything on that. The colorant supplier that we use, one is in Wisconsin, one is in Illinois, but they produce everything in-house. The raw materials that we get, we try like heck to source them all from the U.S. There's certain materials that just aren't made here. An ABS fire retardant, for example, the flame retardant additive it's a rare earth mineral that is like from Thailand or something like that. So, it's just there's certain things that are just impossible to source locally. But all of our distributors that we work with are all U.S. companies, and they work hard to make sure that we're getting materials that we know the origin of.
Okay.
So that was a long way to go to say we really haven't been impacted much. And if we don't get impacted, we're not going to impact our customers.
Well, that is fantastic news from a customer's perspective. I think one of the benefits of the tariffs is potentially being able to showcase the strength of American manufacturing and build that up. That's the whole idea, right?
Right, absolutely.
And so, if you guys are able to stay at that price point, I think you guys are going to be well positioned to be pretty competitive. And then, how will tariffs affect sales internationally for your company? I can't recall. Is international something Coex does?
It's not something that we don't do. So we do have some international customers, primarily Canada. We have certain pockets of the world where there's specific materials. Specifically, if I want to drill down to one, our Coex Flex TPU, our 60A TPU. There's only two companies in the world that manufacture a filament that soft, us and one out of Spain. So that is one in particular. If somebody is looking for a very specific ultra soft TPU, there's only so many places that you can get it. So that particular SKU we export probably more than anything else to Europe and that sort of thing. Now, our Canadian customers, we have a lot of PLA and PETG that goes to specific B2B customers up in Canada. Very rarely, though, does like a hobbyist out of Europe, they wouldn't have a desire to order from us. We for our e-commerce, which we try to guide customers and push them to the e-commerce. Even our B2B customers, we encourage them to buy on our website, and we offer free shipping for orders over $49. Now that's just to the lower 48. So if there are international customers, they're paying the freight. And very often, if somebody's trying to buy one spool of filament from us and shipping it overseas, it's going to cost them, 3 times as much in shipping as it would for the filament. So there's just not a lot of motivation to buy. So, yeah. And we do not really go after actively from a sales standpoint. We don't seek out export business.
Okay. And since you do bring up the TPU 60, that is actually something that one of the viewers asked about. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that came into being?
How it came to be?
Yeah.
It actually predates my time with the company. I bought the business in 2022. I started working in the business in 2020, but the company goes back to 2015, 2016. They started making filaments. So the 60A existed when I came on board. So quite honestly, I really don't know why it was done. I would imagine it was customer driven, and it's been an amazing product for us. The material it's a challenging material to print, very challenging, and not just any old printer will do it. You need to make sure that you have a hot end and an extruder set up that's specifically designed for ultra soft material, which basically in a nutshell, it needs to be a direct drive, number one, and it needs to have a very, very, very constrained filament path. The filament itself feels like a soft rubber band. So there's no rigidity to it whatsoever. So if you've ever tried to push a piece of cooked spaghetti through a straw, it ain't going to work.
Yeah.
You can pull it through, maybe, but you can't push it through. And so if you try to put too soft of a material into a hot end and extruder setup that's not made for it, it's not going to work. And it's an expensive material. I mean, you're talking, closing in on $100 a spool. So we do have some disclaimers on the website to say, make sure you know what you're in for here, and that it takes a specific printer type to be able to do it. Question that we get more of than anything else is, can I print it in my bamboo? And the unfortunate answer is, without some tinkering and some modifications, the answer is no. That those machines are not designed to print material that soft. we know that there's folks that are doing it. We've had some success in doing that here, but it's hard to make a consistent print. So it's amazing material. Once you get it dialed in and you have a setup that'll work on it, it's really cool stuff, but hard to
Yeah.
work with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of TPU filaments when I've been able to use them, but I've never had a need yet for something as soft as 60A.
Yeah.
But I think just like with any engineering filament, right? If you're willing to put in the work, you can get properties that are unmatched by anything else. But there is going to be some work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And we have 4 different durometers of flexible materials. Now, in the 3D printing world, you almost always only hear the term TPU. Technically speaking, our other their 60A that we were talking about is a TPU. The U stands for urethane, a polyurethane. The E in TPE is just a elastomer, so it's a generic term. But to make a product a TPU, the elastomer has to be a urethane base. But rarely do we hear people talk about in the 3D printing community TPEs. I am of the belief, and very strongly of the belief, that many of the TPUs that are on the market are not TPUs. It's not a urethane, it's a TPE. They just don't use the term TPE, and going back to the fact that there's no regulation, they can call it whatever they want.
Yeah.
So the Coax Flex family consists of the 60A, which is the softest that we were talking about, and then everything else we measure in the D scale of the shore hardness scale. So we have a going from softest to hardest, a 30D, a 40D, and a 60D. I would say most people are in that 85, 90, 95A range. So to where that would stack up would be like our 40 or our 60D.
Yeah.
Those two that are the most rigid of the flexibles that we have, now a bamboo is capable of printing that. And most printers, you really should still have a direct drive system. A bamboo is a direct drive. Some people don't realize that, because especially if they're using the AMS and they see it feeding through all the Bowden tubes. But the direct drive means that the extruder gears are right there at the hot end and it's pulling it in. So it's strongly recommended that you don't use your AMS for printing TPUs if you're a bamboo aficionado. Find a different way to feed it. Feed it from the back or overhead is ideal, removing the top lid. But our 60D and our 40D work great in bamboos with no modifications whatsoever. Just don't use the AMS unit.
Yeah. Well, and I'm pretty sure Bamboo still says that about the AMS too, is
they do.
Don't use
they
TPU in the AMS.
Yeah, they came out with that TPU for AMS, and boy, they got lambasted by the public on that, because it doesn't. We bought a spool of that because we wanted to see if it really worked, and we could make it print, but the layer adhesion was absolutely horrific. Like you could just look at it and it would fall apart. And that's one of the things that makes TPEs and TPUs so great to work with, is the layer adhesion. I mean, it's a chemical weld putting that thing together, and it should not be able to come apart. Another interesting thing, and I don't make a habit of slamming our competition, but I will say that we bought 2 different 95As from the same manufacturer, and then put them on shore hardness testers. And neither one of them was even remotely close to 95A. One of them was a lot more rigid, and one of them was actually softer than that.
Huh.
So
yeah, I don't have a hardness tester myself, so I haven't done that personally. But at the
really
same time, I think I think the hand test probably matches up with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I also see on the website that you have DuPont listed with the Coax Flex line.
We have some what? I'm sorry?
DuPont filaments.
Okay.
Can you tell me the story of that?
So I'll tell you the story behind that. So DuPont used to be in the filament business very, very short amount of time. Okay. Sometime in 2018, and then they stopped January of 2020. So very short amount of time. And DuPont has gone through a number of different changes. two major acquisitions. So DuPont, is now called Celanese, owns what was DuPont. So there's a difference between a company name and a trademark name. The trademark of Hytrel is their trademark name for their flexible line of materials, and Zytel is their polyamide, the nylon line. And when DuPont was in the filament business for that very short window of time, they worked with and talked with a number of different manufacturers, and Coex won that bid. So we were the manufacturer of that DuPont filament when DuPont was making filament. And there's still some residual material laying around. So if there's anything listed, that's what that is. But the Zytel is gone completely, and we make a PA6 now, but it's not the Zytel based material. That's no longer available. The 40D and 60D and even 30D Coex Flex is made with a Hytrel, which would have been a DuPont back in the day. But that's made with a Hytrel resin, and it's to the same exact level of what DuPont filament was. So if anybody had experience with the DuPont stuff, it would have come out of our factory, and we're still making the flexible stuff, but no longer have the nylon available.
Okay. Speaking of nylon, though, you guys are working on a new line of nylon. Is that right?
Yeah, we just launched it. Actually, we launched it in between the time that you and I last spoke to where we sit today. So we don't have our full product lineup yet, and we're actually sold out already. We made a bunch of it, and it flew off the shelf. So we placed another order to get more of it compounded right away, but we sold through it a lot faster than we thought, which I guess is a great thing to have happen. But we're working with our supplier all the time to try to get that back so that we can make more of it. So it's a PA6, which means it's a nylon 6.
Okay.
So it's called PA6-CF, which is an easy way of saying it's a carbon-filled nylon.
And just real quick, is that what's listed as Coex Nylex on the site?
So Coex, so Nylex is the trademark name that we have for our nylon line of film.
Okay.
So it still would fall under the Nylex category.
Okay.
So once we have a glass filled, we'll have a PA6-GF, eventually down the road, and then we can expand on that. But Nylex is just a trademark name for that category.
Okay. Well, nylons get me kind of excited as an engineer because there's just things you can't make with anything else. What is going to make Nylex or the Coex nylon line stand out to me?
Well, I think I think much like any of our filaments, it's going to be the consistency of it. The fact that it's going to perform the same spool after spool, batch after batch, because we've sourced the supplier so we have to have that compounded for us. And basically what that means, when we're running our material through our extrusion machines, it's pelletized material. So what we cannot do, because it's a totally different type of machine, we can't take nylon resin and carbon fiber and pour them together and run them through our extruder and then have a carbon-filled nylon, because the extruder doesn't have the ability to blend at that level. There's what's called a compounding machine, which works the same way. It heats up the material and it runs it through the process, and out the other side comes a compounded material. It's evenly blended all the way through. Then it gets repelletized or chopped up. That's what we run through our machine.
Okay.
So if we were to have 20% carbon load and a 30% carbon load, I would have to have a compounder make two separate batches, and we'd have to run one on top of the other. But the consistency part of it, we're going to work with the same compounder who's going to work with the same raw materials and get us the same blend every time. So when we run it, it will always be the same and it's repeatable. Back to the fact of no regulation and no consistency. There's so many grades of nylon. Like you can say PA6. Well, that's just a heading of an enormous category. There's so many different types of materials out there. They're all going to perform a little bit differently. So if you, as an engineer, say, this is a perfect material for my project, and I figured out that I need 4 walls and I need 35% infill, and I'm going to get a part that is going to be able to do exactly what I need it to do. Well, if we changed all of our base materials, you could still run it through and have the same wall thickness and the same infill and find a part that falls apart on you the next time you run it. Now, all the work that you've done and all the promises that you've made to your customers that I got just the right material, well, how do you know it's going to be that the next time you order that spool? And that's where it really comes into play. And it's a very expensive process. I mean, just the raw materials are expensive, but then we're paying a compounder to do that and making sure the compounder is living up to their end of the bargain and we're living up to our end of the bargain. So when I see nylons that are like super cheap, like 35, $40 a spool, I'm like, there's no way. I mean, there's no way it can be what they say that it's going to be. It can't be. So that's going to be the real difference maker, is the consistency. And before we put a product out, I mean, I can't tell you how much money was spent. It's ridiculous on different material trials that we've run before we found a material that we're going to put our name on and say, this is a coax product. This is our PA6CF, because we had to have something that was A, repeatable, B, it had to have high performance, and it had to be easy enough to print. And without all of those variables being checked, we can't consider that product as a coax product.
Yeah, and I recall from our last conversation that you emphasized that you were working on finding that right combination of materials where you felt like you were going to be able to stand by it.
2.5 years. 2.5 years.
Wow.
To get the.
Okay, so the nylon that you see on coax, then that is 2.5 years of research, planning, and development.
Yep.
Well, I would be very excited as a nylon aficionado to try it. And to your point, like consistency, I think it becomes even more important when we're talking about what is effectively a $90 spool, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're going to be shelling out that much money for plastic, you want it to work.
And I don't want to have to buy it back from you.
Yeah, very true.
So,
yep.
Because like I said, we take that satisfaction guarantee very seriously. So I can't put out a bad product that, if I feel like it's going to come bouncing back to us. We don't sell boomerangs.
Awesome. That I think is a great, that should be a mantra. Don't sell boomerangs.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've reached the end of my questions. Is there any parting words, final thoughts that you would like to just put out there?
Just that I appreciate the chance to redo this. I know it was heartbreaking for you that the audio didn't work out, but I think that it's important to get your audience and your viewers a chance at redoing it. So I would just ask the viewing public out there, if you take your 3D printing seriously, and if you just sat through, a 45-minute presentation here or whatever, clearly you must take it seriously. Give us a shot, see what a true quality material is, but also one that's going to be consistent batch after batch after batch. You had mentioned, Jake, the mystery filament that you did.
Yeah.
I don't know if your viewers have a full and complete understanding of what that is. It's kind of a quirky little fun name for it. Another name for it could be called a transition spool. But a mystery spool, as we call it, is nothing more than a byproduct of a color change during manufacturing. So if we're making a blue PLA and the next one in line is green, there's a transition there where the color feeder has to be freshened up. You take the blue out, you clean it out, you put the blue on. So it'll kind of work its way back to a natural color, and then the green starts coming through. And depending on the color change, it takes about 2 kilograms of material every time you do a change. We hate to see that go to waste because there's nothing wrong with it. It's going to print perfectly fine. It just won't be a consistent color all throughout the spool. Sometimes you'll notice a gradual change. Sometimes, unless you're doing a very big print, you really don't notice it at all. We, generally speaking, have them in stock, and where our normal PLA will sell for $24, we sell a mystery spool for $19. It's a great opportunity for somebody to try our material, or if somebody says, hey, I'm building a 63 centimeter rocket ship and I'm going to paint the whole thing. Well, the base color doesn't matter because you're going to paint it. But we do certainly encourage people to try our regular materials of all types, and we have a lot of different colors to choose from. We've got 46 different total PLA colors, I believe. That would include our silk colors. We've got 13 or 14 PETGs. We've got about the same 12 different ABS, and that would also hold true to ASA. One thing I should note, this will be the first time that you've heard this, Jake. We are getting really, really close to launching a PCTG.
Okay.
I would encourage anybody out there to do a quick little Google search and look on your Reddit forums and read about PCT. PCTG, a lot of times when we hear the letters PC together in the 3D printing world, our brains go to polycarb.
Yeah.
This is not a polycarb product. It is something entirely unpronounceable. I haven't even pretended like I can kid you that it's locked into my memory yet. But think of it this way. PCTG would be an alternative to PETG that has been engineered with 3D printing in mind. PETG is an offshoot of PET. There's a glycol additive to it for 3D printing. But PETG, as great of a material it is, it does have some tendencies in the 3D printing world that it can be a little stringy. Some people say it can be a little tough to work with. Some people will say, boy, it either doesn't stick to the bed at all, or if it sticks so freaking hard I can't get it off the bed. PCTG kind of answers many of those concerns. It's also been engineered to be stronger. We have yet to do our strength testing on that. We're working on it now. But our hope is that we're going to find that a material is somewhere in the 20 to 40% stronger. It'll be a couple bucks more than PETG. It will not be up to like a nylon, price tag or whatever. So if PETG is 33, this will probably be 36, 37, maybe something like that. So we've done our production trials. We're very, very happy with the results. We've got a very, very small set of people that are doing their testing. We did not release this for like our full beta trial because we thought we could move on it quicker than that.
Okay.
But the PCT, based on the trials that we did, we just did a handful of different materials. All of them performed really, really well. It was actually almost hard to make a decision of which one we're going to go with. But I do feel like that'll be our next product release, and it prints really well. It's fun to work with and fun to try new materials.
Well, awesome. Sounds like each time we talk, there's always something new on the horizon for COEX, which is great news.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to close this out here real quick then. Thank you again, Todd Luthane. Now saying it correctly, right?
Perfect.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to myself and my viewers. If you are interested in getting your first spool of COEX, because you are going to be a repeat customer after you get your first spool, right? You can use code ODDJOB at checkout to get 15% off. And other than that, ladies and gentlemen, this is Odd Job Entertainment signing off. Thanks for watching.